There's a box in the back of my closet that nobody knows about. It's an old shoebox, actually. Brown cardboard, corners worn soft from decades of sitting there untouched. Inside are things that used to mean everything to me. Acceptance letters to graduate schools I never attended, sketches for inventions I never built, a business plan for a company I never started, notebooks filled with half-finished novels I never completed. Dreams, all of them. Dead dreams, pressed flat like flowers in a book, preserved but lifeless. I haven't opened that box in probably 15 years, maybe 20, but I know exactly where it is. Right there behind the winter boots I rarely wear, beneath the sweaters that don't fit anymore. Hidden. Like the dreams themselves have always been hidden. First in the back of my mind, then in the back of that closet, slowly fading from possibility to memory, to something I try not to think about at all. My name is Walter. I'm 60 years old, and I buried my dreams so my family could live theirs. I'm not looking for sympathy when I say that. I'm not even sure I'm looking for understanding. I'm just stating a fact, the way you'd state that the sky is blue or water is wet. It's just what happened. What I made happen. What I chose, sort of. Though calling it a choice makes it sound like there were other options. Like I sat down one day and weighed my dreams against my family's needs, and consciously decided which mattered more. It wasn't like that. It never is. Dreams don't die in one dramatic moment. They die slowly, quietly, one small compromise at a time. They die in whispers, not screams. They die because you stop feeding them, stop protecting them, stop believing in them. And eventually, you wake up one day and realize they've been dead for years, and you didn't even notice the funeral. Let me tell you about who I used to be, about the Walter who existed before he became just Dad, or Honey, or that guy who works at Henderson Manufacturing. I was going to be an architect. Not just an architect, a builder of important things. I was going to design libraries and museums and schools, buildings that mattered, spaces that would shape how people learned and thought and connected with each other. I had a portfolio, a damn good one too. My art teacher in high school said I had a gift for seeing three-dimensional space, for understanding how people moved through structures. I got accepted to 3 architecture programs. 3. Including one at a prestigious school in Boston that people actually cared about. I remember the day the acceptance letter came. I must have read it 10 times, just staring at the words, "We are pleased to offer you admission," like they might disappear if I looked away. My mother cried. Happy tears, she said. My father shook my hand, told me he was proud. My sisters rolled their eyes the way older sisters do, but I could tell they were impressed. For that one shining moment, I wasn't the youngest kid, the tag-along, the one who was still figuring things out. I was Walter, future architect. Walter, the one who was going somewhere. That was April. By June, everything had changed. Dad had the stroke on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd been at my part-time job at the hardware store, counting down the hours until my shift ended, thinking about which classes I'd sign up for in the fall. Then Mom called. Her voice had this quality I'd never heard before. Thin, stretched tight, like a wire about to snap. "It's your father," she said. "You need to come to the hospital. He survived. That's the good news. The bad news is that the stroke took away his ability to work, took away his strength on the right side, his coordination, his stamina, took away his job at the electrical supply company where he'd worked for 27 years, took away our health insurance, took away any illusion that our family could maintain the life we'd been living without major changes. My older sister, Catherine, was already married, living 2 states away with a husband and a baby on the way. My other sister, Diane, was in her 2nd year of medical school, and there was no way we were going to derail that. She was going to be the first doctor in our family. That dream was too big, too important to sacrifice. So it fell to me. Nobody said it out loud at first. Nobody sat me down and said, "Walter, you need to give up your future so we can survive." It was more subtle than that, more insidious. It came in the form of my mother sighing over bills at the kitchen table. It came in the form of my father, slumped in his chair, staring at the TV without really watching it. This man who'd always been strong, now looking like someone had hollowed him out. It came in the form of my own guilt, the voice in my head that said, "How can you leave them when they need you? How can you spend all that money on school when they're struggling to pay for dad's medication? How can you chase your dreams when your family is drowning?" I told myself it was temporary. I'd defer for a year, maybe two. I'd work, help get things stable, save some money, and then I'd go. My dreams could wait. Dreams are patient, except they're not. Dreams have an expiration date. You just don't know what it is until it's past. I got a job at Henderson Manufacturing, entry-level position on the assembly line. The money was decent, better than the hardware store, and they had benefits. Good benefits, which Dad needed. I moved back home, started contributing to the household expenses, became at 19 years old one of the breadwinners. At first, I kept the dream alive in the margins of my life. I'd come home from work exhausted, smelling like machine oil and metal, and I'd force myself to stay awake drawing, sketching buildings, designing spaces, keeping my skills sharp. I'd study architecture books from the library. I'd tell myself this was just a delay, not a derailment. I'd go back to school. Just not right now. Later. Soon. But soon has a way of becoming someday, and someday has a way of becoming never. Work got harder. More hours, more responsibility. Dad's condition stabilized, but didn't improve. Mom started having her own health problems. The bills kept coming. And somewhere in there, somewhere in the blur of months turning into years, I stopped drawing, stopped going to the library, stopped imagining myself as Walter the architect, and started accepting myself as Walter the factory worker. The dream didn't die all at once. It died in pieces. First, I stopped talking about going back to school. Then I stopped thinking about it every day. Then every week. Then at all. Except in those quiet moments late at night, when I couldn't sleep, and my mind would wander to the life I could have had. I met Margaret when I was 23. By then, I'd been working at Henderson for 4 years. The idea of going back to school felt less like a plan and more like a fantasy, something kids dream about before real life teaches them better. Margaret was real, beautiful, smart, practical. She didn't care that I worked in a factory. She didn't ask about my dreams. She liked me for who I was, not who I might have been. And maybe that's why I fell for her so hard. She offered me an escape from the weight of my own disappointment. When I was with her, I didn't have to think about architecture school or the acceptance letters gathering dust in my drawer. I could just be Walter, the guy who made her laugh, who took her to movies and diners, who had a steady job and a decent future. Not the future I'd imagined, but a future nonetheless. Looking back now, I wonder if I rushed into marriage because it gave me permission to stop mourning what I'd lost. If I had a wife, if I had responsibilities, then I had a legitimate reason to give up on my dreams. It wasn't failure anymore. It was maturity. It wasn't surrender. It was growing up and accepting reality. We got married fast. Had Emily 2 years later. Jake came 3 years after that. And just like that, I had a family of my own to support. New dreams to prioritize. Except they weren't my dreams. They were theirs. And here's the thing nobody warns you about. Once you start living for other people's dreams, you lose the ability to even imagine your own. Your brain rewires itself. You stop thinking in terms of, what do I want? And start thinking only in terms of, what do they need? Your identity becomes so wrapped up in being the provider, the supporter, the the foundation for everyone else's aspirations. That you forget you're supposed to be a person with aspirations too. I remember the exact moment I realized this had happened. Emily was about 5, and she drew a picture of our family at preschool. There was Margaret, tall and smiling. There was Emily herself with the pigtails. There was baby Jake in a stroller. And there was me, just a stick figure with no features, no details, labeled Daddy. Not Walter, not a person with a face or personality. Just a function. Just Daddy, the thing that goes to work and comes home and provides. I stared at that drawing for a long time, and I realized that's exactly what I'd become. Not a person, just a role. The dream killer who'd transformed into the dream enabler. The man who'd given up being Walter so everyone else could be whoever they wanted to be. Here's something nobody tells you about sacrifice. It doesn't feel noble when you're living it. It feels like drowning in slow motion. You know those movies where someone makes a big dramatic sacrifice, and there's swelling music, and everyone recognizes their heroism? Real sacrifice isn't like that. Real sacrifice is getting up at 5 in the morning to work a job you hate, so your daughter can take piano lessons. Real sacrifice is saying, "We can't afford it," to yourself 1,000 times, so you can say yes to your kids once. Real sacrifice is watching everyone around you chase their dreams while yours die of neglect and pretending you're okay with it. Emily wanted to be a writer. From the time she could hold a pencil, she was writing stories. Little kid stuff at first, talking animals, magic kingdoms, the usual. But as she got older, her stories got better. Really good. She had talent. Real talent. The kind that makes you think, maybe your kid could actually make it in a field where most people fail. Our English teacher in high school pulled me aside at a parent-teacher conference. She said, "Mr. Patterson, Emily has a gift. She should consider studying creative writing in college. There are some excellent programs that would be perfect for her." And I said, "Absolutely, we'll make it happen." And I did. I picked up extra shifts, worked overtime, skipped lunches to save money. Did whatever it took so Emily could go to a good school with a good writing program and chase her dream of becoming an author. Because that's what fathers do. That's what I was supposed to do. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. I had the same gift. Maybe not for writing, but for architecture, for design, for seeing beauty and functionality and creating something that mattered. I had teachers who told my parents the same things Emily's teachers told me. I had acceptance letters and potential and talent, and I buried it. I buried it so deep that sometimes I forget it ever existed. But Emily didn't have to bury hers, because I made sure she wouldn't, because I carried the weight so she could fly. Is that noble? Or is it just sad? Jake wanted to play baseball. Not casually, seriously. He was good too, really good, made varsity as a sophomore, got scouted by college teams, had legitimate prospects. His dream was to play college ball, maybe even get drafted. Baseball is expensive. Equipment, travel teams, showcases, training camps. We're talking thousands of dollars a year. Margaret's job covered the basics, but the extras, the things that gave Jake a real shot at his dream, that was on me. So I worked and worked and worked. Took a second job for a while on weekends doing construction work. Came home so tired I could barely move, but I'd still drag myself to Jake's games, because what kind of father misses his son's games? Not this one. Not Walter. Walter shows up. Walter provides. Walter makes sure his kids get their shot at the life they want. Jake got a scholarship to a good school. Played 4 years of college ball. Didn't get drafted, but he got his dream. He got to play at that level. Got to see how far his talent could take him. And when it was over, he moved on to the next thing without regret. Without wondering, what if? without that gnawing ache that comes from never getting your chance. I gave him that. I gave both my kids that. They got to chase their dreams because I didn't chase mine. They got to find out who they could become because I accepted who I was. And most days, I tell myself that's enough, that their happiness is worth my sacrifice, that being a good father means putting your children's dreams before your own. But some days, more days than I want to admit, I feel the resentment creeping in like water through a crack in the foundation. Resentment is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. You don't wake up one day and think, I resent my family. It's subtler than that, more insidious. It starts with small thoughts, little flashes of bitterness that you immediately push down because you're ashamed of them. Like when Emily called to tell me she'd gotten her first book deal, a real publisher, a real book, and my first reaction, before the pride kicked in, was a tiny voice whispering, I could have done that. I had that kind of talent, if I'd been given the chance. Or when Jake posted photos from his college baseball trip to California, grinning on the beach with his teammates, and I thought, I've never been to California. I've barely left this state, because I was too busy paying for everyone else to go places. Or when Margaret talked about her friend who went back to school in her 50s and got a degree in psychology and started a new career, and I felt this hot spike of jealousy. Why does she get to chase a new dream? Why does she get permission to start over? What about my dreams? What about what I wanted? These thoughts make me feel like a terrible person. What kind of man resents his own family? What kind of father begrudges his children their success? I love my family. I'd do anything for them. I have done everything for them. But love and resentment aren't opposites. They can exist in the same space, tangled up like vines, choking each other. You can love someone with your whole heart and still resent them for the dreams you gave up for their sake. You can be proud of them and bitter at the same time. You can want the best for them while quietly mourning what you lost in giving it to them. The worst part is that the resentment makes you feel like a fraud, like you've been lying to everyone, including yourself. Because outwardly, I'm the supportive dad. I show up at every event, every game, every recital. I write the checks, offer the advice, provide the encouragement. I smile and nod and say all the right things. But inside, there's this other person screaming, what about me? When do I get to matter? And then I feel guilty for even thinking that. Because they do matter. My kids matter. Their happiness matters. And a good father doesn't keep score. A good father doesn't calculate the cost of his love and present the bill years later. A good father gives freely, joyfully, without expectation of recognition or reciprocity. But I'm tired of being a good father. Sometimes, God forgive me, sometimes I just want to be Walter. The Walter who had dreams, the Walter who mattered, not because of what he did for other people, but because of what he could do for himself. I never asked for their gratitude, never wanted them to walk around feeling guilty that I sacrificed for them. That's not what this is about. But sometimes, God, sometimes, I just wanted them to see it, to acknowledge it, to understand that their dreams came at a cost, and I'm the one who paid it. I wanted someone to ask me, just once, Dad, what did you want to be? What were your dreams before you became our father? I wanted permission to talk about the box in the closet, about the life I didn't live, about the man I could have been. But nobody ever asked, and I never volunteered, because bringing it up would make me seem selfish. It would cast a shadow over their accomplishments. It would make them feel bad about succeeding. And what kind of father does that to his kids? So I stayed silent. I kept the resentment locked away where it could fester and grow and poison me slowly from the inside out, where it could turn into this dark, heavy thing that I carry alongside all the other weights I've carried for 40 years. There's this thing that happens when you bury your dreams. They don't just disappear, they haunt you. They show up in weird moments, like ghosts rattling chains in your head. I'll be driving to work and pass a new building going up, and I'll think about how I would have designed it differently. Better sight lines, more natural light, more thoughtful use of space. I'll see bad architecture everywhere, strip malls and McMansions and office buildings with no soul, and I'll think, I could have fixed this. I could have made the world a little more beautiful, but I'm at a factory making parts for machines nobody will ever see. Or I'll be watching TV and see a show about architects or designers, and I'll feel this ache in my chest. This physical sensation of loss. Like mourning someone who died, except the person who died is the version of me that could have been. The ghost of my potential. Margaret doesn't understand it. I tried explaining it to her once, years ago. I said something like, sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd gone to architecture school. And she said, well, you wouldn't have me. You wouldn't have the kids. Would you really trade us for a career? And of course the answer is no. Of course I wouldn't, but that's not what I was asking. I wasn't asking if I'd trade my family for my dreams. I was just asking if I could acknowledge that I'd had dreams once, that I'd wanted something for myself, that some part of me still mourns what I gave up. But there's no room for that conversation. No space to say, I love you and I resent what loving you cost me, without sounding like a monster. So I said, no, of course not. I was just thinking out loud. And I never brought it up again. The thing about buried dreams is that they fertilize the soil for your kids' dreams. Your sacrifice becomes their foundation. They stand on your shoulders and reach heights you never could. And you're supposed to be happy about it. And you are happy. Mostly. But there's also this quiet voice asking, what about me? When is it my turn? Except there is no turn. That's the truth nobody wants to say. When you're a man, when you're a father, you're the provider, your turn never comes. You sacrifice, and then you sacrifice more, and then you keep sacrificing until there's nothing left to give. And then you die, and people say nice things at your funeral about how dedicated you were, how hardworking, how selfless. They don't say you had dreams once. They don't say you gave up everything you wanted for everyone else. They just say you were a good man, as if being good means being empty. I think about retirement sometimes, about whether there's still time to do something for myself, to chase some version of the dreams I had. But I'm 60. I'm tired. My back hurts. My knees hurt. I've spent 40 years doing physical labor that's worn my body down. And even if I wanted to go back to school, even if I wanted to try designing something, anything, who's going to hire a 60-year-old man with no experience and no portfolio? Who's going to take a chance on someone who gave up 40 years ago? The window closed. I didn't even notice when. I was too busy making sure everyone else's windows stayed open. Sometimes I try to imagine what my life would look like if I'd been selfish. If I'd gone to architecture school despite my father's stroke. If I'd pursued my dreams and let someone else figure out how to handle the family crisis. What buildings would I have designed? What mark would I have left on the world? Would I be happy? Would I be fulfilled? Would I look back on my life with satisfaction instead of regret? Or would I be racked with guilt? Would I have spent 40 years wondering if my father got the care he needed, if my mother managed to survive financially, if my selfishness destroyed my family? Would I have achieved my dreams only to realize they weren't worth the cost? I don't know. I'll never know. That's the curse of the path not taken. You can imagine it as either paradise or disaster, and both versions feel equally real because neither one was ever tested. But here's what I do know. I made my choice, or circumstances made it for me. Either way, I'm here, at 60, with nothing to show for my life except a family that succeeded and a self that disappeared. And I can't go back. I can't undo 40 years of sacrifice. I can't resurrect the dreams I buried. I can only sit with the weight of what I gave up and try not to let the resentment consume me entirely. I went to Emily's book launch last year. She had it at a bookstore in the city, about an hour's drive from here. There were maybe 50 people there, friends, family, some people from her publishing house. She read a chapter from her book, answered questions, signed copies. She was radiant, confident, living her dream. I sat in the back row, watching her, and I felt this complicated swirl of emotions. Pride, definitely. She's my daughter. I helped make this possible. But also envy and grief, and this overwhelming sense of loss for the person I could have been. After the reading, she came over and hugged me. She said, "Thanks for coming, Dad. It means everything that you're here." And I said, "I wouldn't miss it. I'm so proud of you." And I meant it. Both things were true at the same time. I was proud, and I was devastated. On the drive home, Margaret said, "That was wonderful, wasn't it? Our daughter, a published author." "We did good, Walter." And I nodded and said, "Yeah, we did." But inside, I was screaming. Inside. I was thinking about the box in the closet, about the notebooks filled with my own stories that nobody will ever read, about the buildings I never designed, the mark I never made on the world. I pulled over at a rest stop on the way home, told Margaret I needed to use the bathroom. But I just sat in a stall and cried. Quiet tears, the kind nobody hears, because I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't say, "I'm happy for Emily, and I'm also dying inside because I had dreams too, and I killed them for her." What kind of father says that? What kind of man admits that his children's success makes him feel like a failure? Here's what I think happens to male ambition. Society tells us that being a man means being a provider. It means putting your family first, always, no matter what. It means your worth is measured by how well you take care of other people, not by what you accomplish for yourself. Your dreams are selfish. Your ambitions are indulgent. Real men sacrifice. Real men put their heads down and work and provide and never complain. So we do. We sacrifice. We put our dreams in a box and shove them in the closet. We tell ourselves it's temporary, that we'll get back to them later, that this is just what you do when you have responsibilities. And then later never comes, and the dreams die, and we turn into husks of men, walking around with nothing inside except obligation and exhaustion, and this quiet, growing resentment that we can never voice, because voicing it would make us bad fathers, bad husbands, bad men. I know men my age who are the same way. Tom, my neighbor, wanted to be a musician, played guitar like nobody's business, had a band in his 20s that was actually starting to get somewhere. Then his girlfriend got pregnant, and he got a job selling insurance, and the guitar went in the garage. He doesn't play anymore, says he doesn't have time. But I think it's more than that. I think it hurts too much to touch something that reminds you of who you could have been. Bill, a guy I work with, wanted to be a teacher, history teacher. He loved history, could talk about it for hours. But teaching doesn't pay enough to support a family. So he's been working the line at Henderson for 32 years. Sometimes during lunch break, he'll start talking about World War II or the Roman Empire, and you can see his eyes light up. And then someone will crack a joke, and he'll stop mid-sentence and laugh it off, and go back to eating his sandwich, back to being Bill the factory worker, instead of Bill the historian he should have been. We're all like this. All of us men who prioritized responsibility over ambition, who made the right choices and ended up living the wrong lives, who buried our dreams so deep that most days we forget we ever had them, until something reminds us, until we see our kids living their dreams and we're forced to confront what we gave up. And then the resentment bubbles up, and we feel guilty for feeling it, and we push it back down and go back to work and pretend everything's fine. I'm not saying I regret my family. I need to be clear about that. I love Margaret. I love Emily and Jake. They're good people, and I'm proud of them. If I could go back in time, I don't know that I'd make different choices. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. It's impossible to say. But I think I deserve the chance to find out. I think I deserve to at least try, to see how far my talent could take me, to fail on my own terms instead of never trying at all. And I think it's okay to mourn that. I think it's okay to acknowledge that sacrifice costs something, that giving up your dreams doesn't make you noble. It makes you sad. It makes you human. It makes you a man who carried weight he never asked to carry and lost pieces of himself along the way. Last month, I finally opened the box. I don't know what prompted it. Maybe turning 60. Maybe the heart attack scare I had that made me think about mortality. Maybe just the accumulation of years and regrets finally reaching critical mass. But I went into the closet, moved the boots and the sweaters, and pulled out that old shoebox. The acceptance letters were yellowed. The sketches were faded. The notebooks had that old paper smell, musty and slightly sweet. I sat on the bedroom floor and went through everything, piece by piece, visiting the grave of every dream I'd buried. Some of the designs were actually good, better than I remembered. I looked at them and thought, I had talent, real talent. I could have made something of this. And then I thought, but I didn't. And now it's too late. Margaret found me sitting there. She said, "What's all this?" And I tried to explain. I tried to tell her about the architecture school, about the dreams I'd had, about the life I'd imagined. She listened, and then she said, "Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" And I said, "Because what was the point? It was over before we met. The decision was already made." She said, "But you could have tried later. We could have figured something out. I would have supported you." Would she have? I don't know. Maybe. But by the time we met, the dream was already dying. And after we had kids, there was no time, no money, no energy for Walter's long-dead ambitions. There was only survival, only providing, only making sure everyone else got what they needed. I put everything back in the box, closed it up, put it back in the closet, buried the dreams again. Because what else was I going to do with them? They're fossils now, remnants of an extinct version of myself. The resentment hasn't gone away. If anything, it's gotten stronger as I've gotten older. As I've watched my kids launch their lives and realized mine is mostly over. I have maybe 20 years left, if I'm lucky. 20 years of being old and tired and used up. 20 years of retirement that I can't afford because I spent everything making sure my kids didn't start their lives in debt. 20 years of looking back at what could have been and knowing I'll never find out what it actually would have been. Is this what I was put on earth for? To work jobs I hate so other people can work jobs they love? To kill my dreams so other people's dreams can live? To be a stepping stone for everyone else's journey while going nowhere myself? I don't have answers. I just have questions and resentment and this deep, bone-level exhaustion that comes from carrying weight for 40 years with no end in sight. Jake called me last week. He's thinking about going back to school, getting an MBA. He asked if I thought it was a good idea, and I said yes, of course. Chase your dreams, keep growing, keep becoming. What I didn't say was, I never got that chance. I never got to go back to school or chase my dreams or keep becoming. I got frozen at age 19, and I've been that same person ever since, just older and more tired and more resentful. What I didn't say was, I'm happy for you, and I'm also dying inside. Every time one of you achieves something, it reminds me of everything I didn't achieve, everything I couldn't achieve because I was too busy making sure you could. What I didn't say was, sometimes I wonder if you even know what I gave up for you, if you understand that your dreams came at the cost of mine, if you care. I just said, I'm proud of you, son. Go for it. I think about the man I could have been, the architect, the builder, the creator, the man who made beautiful things and left a mark on the world. The man who had ambitions beyond just surviving until the next paycheck. That man is dead, has been dead for 40 years. I buried him myself, one choice at a time, one sacrifice at a time. I buried him so thoroughly that most people don't even know he existed. But I know. I carry his ghost with me every day, every time I see bad architecture, every time I drive past a new building, every time I think about what could have been. He's there, haunting me, reminding me of everything I gave up. And the worst part, nobody sees it. Nobody knows that I walk around with this weight, this grief, this resentment. They just see Walter, the factory worker. Walter, the good father. Walter, the responsible man who always does the right thing. They don't see the dreams I buried. They don't see the man I killed. They don't see the cost of their comfort. If you're listening to this and you're a young man with dreams, chase them. Don't let anyone tell you that responsibility has to mean killing your ambitions. Don't fall into the trap I fell into, thinking your dreams can wait. They can't. They have an expiration date, and once it passes, you don't get them back. If you're listening to this and you're a father who sacrificed everything, I see you. I know what you gave up. I know the weight you carry and the resentment you can't voice. You're not alone. There are thousands of us, maybe millions, walking around as shells of who we could have been. We buried our dreams so our families could live theirs, and nobody will ever fully understand what that cost us. And if you're listening to this and you're someone whose dreams came true because your father sacrificed his, maybe take a moment to think about that. Maybe ask him what he wanted before he became just dad. Maybe acknowledge that your success came at a price he paid. I don't know. I'm just an old man with a box in his closet and regrets in his heart and no good answers to any of the questions that matter. Margaret's calling me. Dinner's ready. I should go. But before I do, I want to say this one last thing. I buried my dreams so my family could live theirs. It was the right thing to do. It was the thing a good man does. It was what fathers are supposed to do. But God, it hurts. It hurts every single day, and I don't think it's ever going to stop. If you have stayed until here, I would appreciate you dropping a like and subscribe. God bless.